Hey everybody, this is Mike with the QuestBrothers, just doing an Arcanist build video for Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. First of all, looking at the subtypes here, we have Brown Fur Transmuter, which makes you better at buff spells and transformation spells. I would say that for transformation, a druid does it better. For buffing, a bard does it better. I would recommend against this. Eldritch Font lets you cast one more spell per level, but you sacrifice having your options of spells to choose from. Again, I would recommend against this because having a little bit of versatility can be pretty important. Nature Mage lets you use the Druid spell list. I would say if you're going to do that, you should probably be a Druid because Druids are quite powerful in this game. And one of the whole points of being an Arcanist or Arcanist is that you can access the wizard spell list, which is quite potent. The Phantasmal Mage, first of all, you have to be a gnome. Second of all, it just makes you a little bit better at illusions. So not terrible, but I would not recommend it. The Unfettered, it gives you the Witch spell list. The Witch spell list is interesting. It's not a bad spell list. I would say on the whole, it's not as good as the Wizard spell list. It does have healing spells. So if you want to have slightly different options and be able to heal sometimes, you can go with this. Again, I don't know if I'd recommend that. The White Mage is similar, but they give up some of their exploits, which we'll go over in a moment, in order to have spontaneous healing. If you're not planning on having a dedicated healer in your party, this might be the only one I would actually recommend because it means you'll be able to cast cure spells as an Arcanist, which is generally an arcane spellcaster. So for our build and what I would recommend, we're just going to go for the standard Arcanist. We're not going to use any subtypes. Now just take a quick look at the features and abilities. This is really what sets an Arcanist apart from a wizard, and in my opinion makes it the better class, at least in this game. You get spellcasting, which is not surprising. You get Arcane Reservoir, which allows you to use your exploits. Most of the exploits take 1 point. The amount of points you can have is 3 plus your level, your class level. The exploits themselves give you abilities and just different things you can do with the class, which is almost like supernatural abilities or extraordinary abilities, which you can use anytime you want. And you can do quite a lot of them if you're willing to sacrifice some of your spells as well. We'll get into that in a moment. And for now, we'll just quickly take a look at races. The most important stats for an Arcanist are intelligence first and foremost, then dexterity, mostly for survivability, then charisma. Charisma because the amount of times that you can sacrifice a spell for an Arcanist is equal to, I think it's 1 plus your charisma modifier. So you're going to want to have probably maybe 14 charisma, so you can do that at least 2, 3, 4 times in any given day, because you want to be able to fill that pool at least a few times. Elf gives you +2 to dexterity, +2 in intelligence, -2 to con. It's a pretty good build. It also gives you some weapon efficiencies, which you would not otherwise get as an Arcanist. Gives you elven immunities, it gives you some resistances, and it gives you bonus to perception checks. All of those are quite useful and are kind of weaknesses which we're going to have as an Arcanist, which will help shore up. Another popular choice is a Tiefling. Look at the Tiefling. The basic Tiefling I would recommend against, because although it does give you bonus to dexterity and intelligence, it gives you a penalty to charisma. So you're going to have to waste points getting that up so you can sacrifice more spells. The one that's probably the best is the Grim Spawn. The Grim Spawn gives you +2 to intelligence and dex, which are our important stats, -2 to wisdom, which we're okay dumping as an Arcanist. Kitsune, this is the one here. It's the Keen Kitsune. The Keen Kitsune gives you +2 to dexterity, +2 to intelligence, -2 to strength. This might, in a lot of ways, this might be better than the elf because really you do not need strength. We'll go ahead with this one for this particular build, but it's up to you. It's just a trade-off whether you want to have a couple bonuses to your saves, be able to use a longsword as an elf, or you want to have lower strength, more hit points as a Kitsune. For the background, If you don't have a firm choice of what you want, then I'd recommend reading through these. Some of them are pretty interesting. Pickpocket is a pretty good standard choice. It gives you +2 bonus to initiative, which is very important as a spellcaster. Also gives you access to trickery and stealth, which you normally don't have access to as an Arcanist. And because your intelligence is high, you will end up generally with quite a few skill points to spend. So we'll take a look at what we have here. We can make our strength all the way down to 5. That might be a little too low. 6 is not too bad. As long as you have party members, they'll be able to help the load. And really, as an Arcanist, that's probably all you're going to need that for, because if you're getting in melee combat, you're already in trouble. Dexterity of 16 is not bad. It gives you a bonus to your AC. If you're using a bow, which is probably or a crossbow, probably what you're going to want to use when you're not casting spells, you get a bonus with that. Constitution of 12, so you won't die right away. Intelligence you want at 19 or 20. For this build, I'm just putting it at 19, mainly because at level 4, we're going to bump that up when we get a stat bonus, and then it'll be 20. Wisdom 12, and we're just doing charisma of 14. Again, just with that +2. You can make this higher if you want, sacrifice your wisdom, even your constitution. But all it does is it gives you a few extra options, or a few extra times of sacrificing spells, which is important, but you're not going to be wanting to sacrifice all your spells anyway. For the beginning of the game, the way it starts out, I would say trickery and stealth is going to be less important. Probably knowledge skills more important. So we'll start off with this build with all of our points in knowledge. Then looking at feats, combat casting, or I would recommend improved initiative. Improved initiative gives you +2 bonus. That does stack with the background we took, so it's a total of +6. On top of your dex, that's going to be +9, which is a pretty good initiative bonus to start with. There's other things you can take. Magical Tail can be kind of fun if you're going to be a Kitsune. However, I would say combat casting so that you can successfully cast a spell if something comes up to you, or improved initiative, which is what we'll take for this build. And now we have the Arcanist exploits. These are what really differentiate an Arcanist from a wizard, and what a lot of people say makes them better than a wizard. Using these, you spend arcane energy. Arcane energy for an Arcanist is contained in your arcane reservoir, which we briefly touched on. The amount of energy, the amount of points you have in your arcane reservoir, is equal to 3 plus your Arcanist level. Every day when you rest, you get an amount equal to 3 plus half of your level back. So every time you rest, you'll have not a full pool, but enough that you can get by with. You can top it up by sacrificing or consuming spells. You get 1 point per each level of the spell that you sacrifice. The amount of spells you can sacrifice is tied to your charisma. This is why I said charisma is somewhat important. Not only does it add to damage and a few different things in your exploits, although really it's not a huge deal, but that your charisma is what gives you the amount of spells you can sacrifice in a day. Let's take a look here. For example, Acid Jet, which is a pretty darn good one. It takes 1 point, so even a first level Arcanist will be able to do this, say, 4 or 5 times. More if you sacrifice a couple first level spells. It is a ranged touch attack, which means it's pretty easy to hit. It does 1d6 points of acid damage, which is a pretty good damage type, especially if you're doing this much damage. It does give you charisma bonus to damage. However, even if it's +2, +3, at first level, it makes a big difference. Maybe 1d6 +2 or 3. However, at 19th level, for example, you have 10d6 +2 or 3. So really your charisma is much less important for an Arcanist. For these, I would say my favorite are probably a lot of the direct damaging ones. Force Strike does less damage. You get a bonus of 1 per level. Force damage can be useful though. Things like ghosts, various different creatures, some of them immune to different damage types. Force, however, damages most things. So you do less damage, but it'll all get through. Acid Jet, Flame Strike, Force, Ice, Lightning, they're all pretty good. Another one of my favorites is Dimensional Slide. This one in the pen and paper game is tied to your charisma. In this game, it's not, which again makes charisma even less important for an Arcanist. As a move action, you spend 1 point, so you'll be able to do it again as a first level, maybe 4 or 5 times per day, and you teleport anywhere which is close by. So if you are caught on the wrong side of your allies, you can teleport behind them and start casting spells. It can be pretty useful. Armored Mask is one which might seem very tempting. It does not level well, however. All it does is it lets you use Mage Armor and then Shield of Faith after that if you already have Mage Armor up. But when you get to higher levels, you're probably going to have magic items which will make these null. If you have Braces of Armor, for example, +4, then that gives you an armor bonus of +4. Then this spell does nothing because it also gives you a +4 and it does not stack. Wooden Flesh is a little bit better. It gives you a natural bonus to armor. At least natural armor bonuses always stack with each other. Regardless, I would say let's go with either Dimensional Slide or Acid Jet. Let's stick with Acid Jet. Let's throw some acid in people's faces. Now, spells. The way spell casting works for an Arcanist is you can add spells from scrolls. You can have a long list of spells. Every day in the morning, you choose just a few of those spells, you memorize them. Then when you cast spells, you expend a spell slot and you can choose from any of the spells you've memorized to cast them. That's another place where wizards and arcanists are different, because wizards can memorize more spells but cast fewer, whereas arcanist will have fewer spells but cast more at any given time. For your direct damage dealing, because we took Acid Jet, we're going to be using our Arcanist points for direct damage dealing. So we're going to be either using a crossbow, which is the most likely, or sometimes our Acid Jet. For your spells, you want to be taking things which can really change the situation if you get in trouble. When you're choosing what you're going to take, that will probably end up just being whatever your favorite is from what you have. But a lot of times you might know what situation you're getting into. If you know you're going somewhere where you're not supposed to get caught, then you want to put Vanish as one of your 2 options. If you're going somewhere where the enemies are really high level and you think you're going to get overwhelmed, maybe Summon Monster might be helpful to add extra party member to your group. We've chosen Burning Hands because sometimes fire damage is very important. Expeditious Retreat because we didn't take Teleport on this one, and this will increase your speed by 30 feet. You'll be able to run around and position yourself in combat. It lasts 1 minute per level, so that's going to be at least the entirety of one fight. We're going to get rid of Magic Missile because we have Acid Jet, and we're going to take Grease. I think once we start the game, we might end up with Grease and Burning Hands, or Grease and Expeditious Retreat. These are going to be mostly used for battlefield control, not direct damage. As again, like I said, that's either going to be our light crossbow or our Acid Jet. And I think we're pretty good with spells there. True Strike is one of the worst spells in the game in my experience. You sacrifice a standard action to most likely hit in the next one, whereas instead of that, you could just attack twice, and you'll probably hit in 2 attacks anyway. Your deity selection is not going to matter except for role-playing wise, because an Arcanist is not tied to a deity, so we'll just go with Lawful Neutral. And there we go. That is your character. Everything else is just customization. If you like this video, give us a like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.